right, let me see, who's still out there? The commissioner. Come on in. I'm so obnoxious when it's not even loud enough. It's too soft. Okay. Can everybody hear me? This is working. All right, very good. We're going to start, if you don't mind, putting your pizza down for just a second and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Flag is right up here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for making your way here in the heat. I really appreciate it. This hair, you've seen me wear it now since May, I think it was 19th. Probably be like this until the end of November, so I hope you like this look. That's the way it is, so and we'll all survive, I'm sure. So what we're going to do real quick, we're going to do the roll call, and the police are not able to come tonight. They had something that they were involved in at the last moment, so they're not going to be here, and that's okay. We see them quite often. They come to almost every meeting. So we're going to go ahead, and Dr. here is going to do the roll call real quick, so just make sure that you speak up so that we make sure we get you on here. Okay.
Let's get started then. Bermuda Rivera. Okay. Beverly Heights Neighborhood. Birch Park Beach Homeowners Association. Breakwater Homes. Central Beach Alliance. Here. Central City Alliance. Cully Hammock Homeowners Association. Coral Ridge.
Here.
Coral Ridge Country Club.
Here.
Coral Ridge Isles.
Here.
Coral Shore Civic Association. Crescent Park.
Here.
Dolphin Isles Homeowners Association. Downtown Fort Lauderdale Civic. Edgewood Civic. Flagler Village.
Here.
Gold Mile Community Association. Golden Heights Homeowners Association.
Here.
Harbordale Civic Association.
Here.
Harbor Beach Property Owners. Harbor Inlet Association.
Here.
Historic Dorsey River Bend. Home Beautiful Park Civic Association. Idlewood Improvement. Imperial Point Association.
Yeah.
Lake Erie Civic Association. Lake Ridge Civic Association.
Here.
That's loud. Landings Residential Association. Lauderdale Beach Homeowners Association.
Here.
Lauderdale Harbors Improvement Association.
Here.
Lauderdale Isles Civic Improvement Association. Lauderdale Manors Homeowners Association.
Did you hear that?
Yep.
Okay.
Laudergate Isles Civic Association.
Here.
Mass. Okay. Melrose Manors Homeowners Association. Middle River Terrace Neighborhood. Normie Isles Homeowners Association. Palm Air Village 1. Quincyana Heights Civic Association.
Here.
Quincyana Park Civic Association. Okay. Progresso Village. Rio Vista, here. River Garden Sweeting Estate.
Here.
Riverland Preservation Society. River Landing Homeowners Association. Here. River Oak Civic Association.
Here.
River Park Residents Association. Rock Island Community.
Here.
Sailboat Bend Civic Association.
Here.
Seven Isles Civic Association. Shady Bank Civic Association. Sunrise Intercoastal Homeowners Association.
Right here.
Okay. South Middle River Civic Association. Tarpon River Civic Association. That was two of them. Victoria Park Civic Association. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so without further ado, because I know you guys don't want to be here late into the night, right? So we don't have a bar in here, so we're not going to do that. So we're going to go right ahead. We have here tonight our city manager, who I think you all know, and we also have Anthony Fajardo. He's right there. And we'll have our city manager come up first, and then if we need, and Laura Reese, who also has a presentation. So we'll go ahead. We're going to mainly talk about the budget. Remember that? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Greetings, everyone. Glad to be here. Thank you for making the time. Just want to say that over the past year, the City of Fort Lauderdale, directed by the City Commission, has looked at many initiatives. We want to make sure that we focus and deliver on outcomes that were prioritized by the Commission. And you will find that the budget that was prepared addresses key points that the Commission prioritized back in January. So in January, the Commission met here, prioritized, and so now you have a budget that will ensure that we focus on those top priorities, which range from homelessness, mitigation, to housing, to public safety. And Laura will go in depth and speak about those as well. You will also see certain points about utility rates, and certainly we could have more conversations on that. But what I want to address is that we're scaling our services to meet the demands of City of Fort Lauderdale residents and business owners, and we are doing it without a millage increase for 17 years. So that's very remarkable from the staff level and also from your input. This budget also was prepared with the support of the Budget Advisory Board. So the Budget Advisory Board made a lot of input into what you all will see that will be adopted very soon. So now Laura has prepared a presentation. She will go in depth in the numbers, and feel free to ask any questions that you may want. This can be very interactive. We want to make sure that you have as much information as possible so that you can inform your different neighborhoods. And also, we'd like to get any feedback or any questions from you all and make sure that everything is answered before the adoption of the budget, which will be September 6th? 5th and 13th. So September 5th and 13th. So Laura, if you could please join us, and she'll talk about the budget highlights.
It's up here. Hey, Greg, you can have a seat right there if you want to. Yes.
If you'd like, let's have her do the presentation. Maybe throughout it, she can answer it. So she has some very good figures that I perhaps will answer your question.
Oh, thank you. Is that gonna work? Yeah, I'm holding it. I think I can see it. Maybe I don't need this one. That's okay. I thought I'd have to look at it, but I think I can see that too. All right. So good evening, everyone. My name is Laura Reese, Director of Office of Management and Budget for the City of Fort Lauderdale. So I've seen some of your faces before, advisory board meetings, infrastructure task force, so I can kind of pick out a few committees. So thank you for the work that you do in the city. In the City of Fort Lauderdale, the budget is proposed by the city manager based upon input from the community and our commissioners, the direction that they provide for priorities. And then we go through a 5-month process to develop the budget. So we start the budget process the end of January when the commission does their goal setting and they tell us what their priorities are for the next year. And we're required by charter to have a proposed budget, this book, submitted to the commission in the month of July. So that's sort of the process we go through. A lot of input, as Greg mentioned, from the Budget Advisory Board. Infrastructure Task Force gives us their input on what capital projects to fund, and then the community groups provide their inputs through a variety of different ways as well.
Next slide.
let me see. Oh, here we go. It's working now, I think. Okay. So, I guess bottom line up front is what Greg always asks us to do. So here's what we think that you care a lot about. So the average single family tax bill will go up by $38 in the year. And so as Greg said, the millage rate stays the same at 4.1193. The fire assessment fee, we're going up to full cost recovery this year, which is an increase of $17. Stormwater assessment, which is now on the tax bill, it used to be on the utility bill, will go up by $26. And the voter approved debt will actually go down, and that's because the taxable value went up this year. So it's a calculation. And you all will be getting your trim notices. I talked to the property appraiser's office this weekend. They were just finalizing the roll to send to the vendor. So you should be receiving your tax bills within, or your trim notices, which is the notice of proposed taxes, within the next 7 days. And so in addition to that, in order to fund some of our utility accounts, so our water and sewer fund and our sanitation fund, we have slight increases that you'll see on your utility bill. So on your bill, you'll see your water rate, you'll have water, sewer, and sanitation are all on the same bill. So you'll start seeing those increases in the month of October. So our budget book kind of provides a lot of detail, but what we've done in the budget book is we've aligned the commission priorities to what's being funded. And some of the key things that are being funded are public safety. Really, a lot of the enhancements you'll see in the budget this year. We have 10 additional positions in fire rescue. The goal was to add additional lieutenants so that we had 3 people on the rescue units, and that would allow the rescues to respond by themselves without having to have a fire truck actually respond with them too. So we added that to 2 different rescue units in the proposed budget. In addition, 14 police officers were proposed to be added as part of the budget. In terms of the CIP, most of the capital projects that are recommended, these are the cash-funded capital projects from the general fund. Most of them focus in on bridges, seawalls, sidewalks. We move from $1.5 million a year all the way to $2.5 million in the out year of the CIP. The direction's really been to enhance funding as it relates to streets, sidewalks, replacing, repairing the bridges that need to be maintained, seawalls, and the detailed project list can be found in the CIP, but those are the highlights. Mary asked me to include information tonight about taxpayer dollars that are being recommended for not-for-profit organizations. So this year, we've actually reduced the recommended amount for not-for-profit organizations to the total's $2 million. So last year, the total, I believe, was around $500,000 more than that. And there is a lot of Parks Bond projects that are also going on this year. So there's a full website set up where you can click and interact with the Parks Bond projects that are happening in your community. And this is an example of the site, and you would just click on your park, and it would tell you what's going on, what's anticipated for the completion date. Our overall operating budget in all funds this year that's being proposed for the first time exceeds $1 billion. So that's the first time we kind of hit that threshold, and that includes the cash that we plan to receive in the year and the transfers out as well. So this does not include anything that's debt funded separately in the CIP. So this is only cash in and cash out. We really have tried over the years to control the number of new employees. 74% of new employees added over the last 10 years are in public safety, either police or fire. And for the general fund, around 40%, 47% of the budget comes from property taxes, and the rest come from other areas such as the fire assessment, some state revenues, fees for services that you pay when you go to a park, and items such as that. So That's really good because a diversified revenue base, you're less impacted when something happens. So during COVID, we were really afraid of, everyone was like, what's going to happen, right? Everything shut down. We were impacted, our fees for services were impacted, but really nothing else was impacted during the year. So I believe it was around $20 million we lost in revenue during the year. If you're more reliant on resort taxes and other things that are based upon the economy, you're more at risk for that happening. So when we get bond folks coming in to rate us, they really like to see this diversified pie, and it shows that our city's in a good financial position. Where's the money go? Police and fire take up over half of the budget, and then there's other key operating expenses such as parks and recreation, transportation and mobility, and then the smaller departments that provide support. Ad valorem, as Greg mentioned, has stayed the same for 17 years. So despite a recession and increase, we've really tried to be responsible with your taxpayer dollars to make sure that we can control expenses and create less of a burden on our things. Thank you. And that's driven by the commission that, they really want to keep the rates low for taxpayers and be responsible with your funds. And so that's sort of where the property appraiser did give us a nice increase this year. So new construction and taxable values did go up by 11.7, and that's what really allowed us to fund the new police and fire positions this year. We have a website that provides financial transparency and public accountability. That's really important to us. You can go on and you can dig into the expenses of the police department, the fire department. You can dig in all the way to like, what do we spend on healthcare for our animals? In the Marine unit, it lets you dig down to that level. So that's available. We encourage you to take a look. Also, we just went live with the new Balancing Act. So our proposed 2024 budget is out there in Balancing Act. There's an interactive system where you can provide input, and we summarize that for our mayor and commissioners before the public hearings. So please provide your input, take a look on behalf of yourself, on behalf of the community. And what it does is it asks you, if you wanted to fund something more, what would you not fund? Because at the end of the day, we have to have a balanced budget. So in order to provide meaningful taxpayer input, we'd want to know if you were adding something, where would we take money? And then you would submit your new balanced budget, and we'd consider them with the other balanced budgets that are submitted. And So the last place to provide public input is the public hearings. So on your term notice, you'll get notice of the first public hearing, which is on September 5th at 5:01 p.m., and that's at the Parker Playhouse. So that's going to happen right before our regular commission meeting. And so there's a public hearing on the millage rate and the budget at that meeting. The second public hearing, there's also the meeting where you provide any public input on the non-ad valorem rates. So that's the fire assessment, stormwater assessment, and those non-ad valorem rates. So this concludes the presentation I prepared, but if you have any questions, we're happy. How do we navigate that?
I'll go around and pass the mic here, so.
And
please
I'd like to, make sure that, I have to say this every time, don't forget, I want these questions and comments to be respectful. And I would like it when you have a question, make it be the question, not a paragraph of how you feel about something, but a question that they can answer. Okay, makes sense? Okay, so.
I have a microphone
So here's a
here.
microphone, and wait for the microphone so that you're on the recording, okay?
And Mary, do you want them to state their name and what neighborhood they're
That's
from?
a good idea.
Okay.
So you know what, neighborhood and things like that, great idea. Thank you.
Good evening. Christine Jones, Lauderdale Manor HOA. I have two questions. Number one, I couldn't read none of that stuff up on that presentation. We need to be able to get that ahead of time so we can look at it, if you don't mind. I just have a major question because the budget, I think, should contain infrastructure stuff. Our roads are horrible. Some of the streets in the neighborhood don't have any tar on them anymore. They like white roads now. Is there anything in the budget that address that infrastructure and fixing our roads in our communities?
Thank you for your question, and I'll get with Mary to make sure she has the presentation afterwards. I'm sorry, we didn't distribute that in advance. But this is a summary of the operating budget, so the operating budget has even more information. I just tried to pull out pieces you might care about, but we'll make sure you do get the presentation. So that's a good question. There's actually a partner book to this, the proposed budget, called the Capital Improvement Plan or Community Investment Plan. But in the budget, any of the cash funded capital is included. And so I believe what you're talking about is street resurfacing. And we dedicate around $3 million a year. And you would find the money in the gas tax fund, some money in the general fund, and then in the CDBG fund or the HCD fund, which is 108. And so those three funding sources, we use a pavement condition index that's created. So our Public Works Department partners with a third-party company, and they, from what I saw, they drive the roads with like this machine behind it, and it tells you which ones are the worst roads. And then they prioritize the roads based upon the condition in a plan, and they hire a third-party company to do the full resurfacing of the roads. In between that, we have the city funds a roadway crew. So we did that for the first time 3 years ago, and that crew really focuses on the smaller issues and the potholes. And so if you do have a problem with the road, the 8,000 number is where you should call, 954-828-8000. They're gonna log that, and Public Works will go out. If there's something that was missed in the pavement condition assessment, or if there's a small problem, they can maybe fix that right away or get you on the list with that contractor. Thank you. You're welcome.
Hi, Jim Labrie, Poinsettia Heights. You had a slide that showed additional staffing, and also you had a slide that showed the different departments. Police and fire, you said, took around half or just over half. Parks and Recreation is the third most expensive department based on that slide. So are we adding more people? Two questions. Are we adding more people to Parks and Rec? And how do you decide when it's time to add people to a department such as Parks and Rec? Are there performance standards? Do you have metrics that you compare to other cities of the same size? How is that done? Because people are expensive.
Right. So, yeah, great question. So I guess, first of all, in that slide, it did show the number of positions by department, and we have the cost by department. And you're right, they're really similar. So the largest department is police, followed by fire rescue, followed by public works, actually. And then the parks is behind that. But parks is a larger part funded in the general fund versus the public works has a lot of other funding sources. But in terms of Parks and Rec services, it's typically driven by commission priorities. So if the commission would like to see additional programs offered, parks would either reappropriate from their existing programs. So for example, if the commission cares a lot about summer camps, maybe they would do fewer of one sort of program and more of another. We do look at that programming during budget development. We have something we call program-based budgeting. And so what you see in the budget is at a very high level, but we break that down index by index. So when we're meeting with the city manager each year, he's looking at the revenues versus expenses that happen at the aquatics complex, so we know what the net is to taxpayers of the aquatics complex and what programs they're performing, what performance metrics. So a lot of that is kind of done behind the scenes. We call it the sausage making, where we're looking at the programs and are the programs being utilized? You don't want to fund programs if nobody's showing up. And we're trying to use that data to reappropriate funds when at all possible so that we don't have to add staffing and still meeting the needs of the commission and the community. So I don't know if that gets you to your, okay. Anything you'd add, Greg?
No, that,
Any?
Bruce?
so just wanted to say that our Parks Director also benchmarks with other parks. We also win awards. So we are at par with other cities, and we benchmark programs as well for after-school and summer programs. And we find that we get qualified as well by the neighbors. And so we use that as our method for determining staff that we need for the programs.
Yes, Brucey Cummings from Tarpon River. I noticed, if I saw correctly, it was like 2,758,000 plus for 14 staff on the police department, which comes to 197 per person, thousand. There's
Yeah.
gonna be something
the
that I'm
cost.
missing on that, or I'm gonna become a police officer really quickly.
Great question, Brucey. So the first year of any new program is the highest because it includes a lot of the startup costs. So for a police officer, when you hire a new officer or you're starting up the program, you need to buy a new car. Those are really expensive, a new Tahoe with bulletproof panels. You have to buy new guns. You have to buy bulletproof vests, computers. All of those startup costs really drive a lot of the costs in year one. And then year two, it goes down slightly because you're not funding those startup costs, but those are the correct. Right, that's all included, because we have to pay for the full cost in the first year, yeah.
And Laura, you might want to explain the disparity between the fire and the police because of the 6-month.
Yeah, so, as Bill is indicating, so if you were to compare it to the number either below or above it, which is the additional firefighters, that number is significantly lower for a couple of reasons. Reason number one is we're not buying new vehicles, we're adding a person to an existing rescue, so those startup costs aren't there. The second reason is, because of the recruitment process for fire, we only funded the lieutenants for 6 months because it's going to take that long to get folks on board in fiscal year '24.
My question, I'm Ed Rebholz from Lauderdale Harbors. How much debt is the city carrying now? And second question is, what do we spend in interest a year?
All right, so, great questions. On page 111 is what I'm referring to. In the proposed budget book, we do try to be really transparent. So this is all funds. So it's water sewer debt, stormwater, all of that, right? So at the beginning of fiscal year 2023, the city's outstanding debt was $890 million. But in '24, we plan to add almost $800 million in new debt. So we're almost doubling that. And a large part of that is the water sewer plant. And so of that amount, $586 million is related to water sewer. And then 200 million for stormwater, which is the large neighborhoods. So yeah, that gets you to, and so in terms of interest for fiscal year '24, with the new debt online, we have budgeted to pay $61 million in interest in all funds. So that's the, and again, page 111 of the budget book tries to provide, yes, question number 2.
I wonder if I could get a quote, what you have in front of you?
It's available online.
Okay.
So we don't print like a bunch of extras, but if I could make sure you get the link to it, but if you really want a copy, we might be able to.
I can read it on.
Okay.
Easy enough
Yep.
if I knew where to go.
Yep, so if you go on the city's website and just type in budget, it's gonna take you right to our website. You'll see the full CIP book where it provides the very detailed project descriptions as well. And then the operating budget gives you all of this information. It sounds like you're gonna like the financial section a lot, so that's gonna, that's gonna be your go-to area.
Good afternoon. Frankie Lane from Rock Island Homeowners Association. When I was looking at your budget, you said there would be a increase in the sanitation. And my question is why? They're not doing a job every 3 months. You're bringing in new personnel. In the last 6 months, I've had 3 different companies come up and down my street with the same raggedy trucks, dripping oil and garbage and sewer everywhere. And you said there were 22 funded projects, but 0 are in District 3. I mean, it's like we're the stepchild, we don't get nothing. And then you said we're not hiring service personnel, so who's gonna do the work?
So I don't know the last question, but let me try to answer your first 2, and then, so the first one's about the sanitation rate. So, this year we entered into a new agreement with a new vendor, and we outsource bulk. so two major changes in the operations of our sanitation fund. I understand there have been frustrations. Maybe offline, we can try to understand yours a little bit more. I'm not sure that the budget person's the best to respond to that. I know operationally what happened, was bulk services was outsourced, so now we don't use our own staff, we use a third party. And that was to save money to reduce the increase to your budget, to your bill. So the increase is gonna be 4%, and that's really just an inflationary increase to account for the cost of service going up. You know, you have to pay people, pay for trucks, so it's 4%.
City hired personnel still doing sanitation?
No.
Oh,
No, so the sanitation functions that are done by city personnel at this point is only beach cleaning. And the rest are performed by third parties. We contract with, I believe it's Reliable. Do you have more to add?
Waste management.
Waste management.
Call 8,000 number, and I need to know
Okay.
address.
Yep. So, so the city manager indicated that the best way to get your issue resolved is to call, 954-828-8000, and they'll be able to specifically look at, who's responsible for your project. I'm sorry.
I shouldn't have to do this every week.
Okay.
My Saturday pickup, I get picked up this Sunday morning. You know, I shouldn't have to
I
do
agree,
this
yeah.
every week.
I agree, and we're happy to look at it if we have more details, or if you, I'm
appreciate
sorry.
I just need the address.
Yeah, the address. So, but I think you had a last question, which was related to service personnel. Was that related back to the trash again?
No, it's not about that.
Oh, okay, so I
Because
don't
you
understand
said
that one.
We were not hiring many service personnel, we were doing more of the police
Yeah,
fireman thing.
right.
So is all the service work gonna be sourced out?
So we believe that we're meeting demands of services. We didn't, the fiscal year 2024 proposed budget doesn't increase any many other personnel other than public safety. So if there's an area where there's concern, we're happy to look at it. But yeah, we're really trying to control the growth of staff in the budget in order to keep the millage rate low. If there's a service area where you believe needs some examination, we're happy to look at that.
Outsourcing is cheaper.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Make sure, just raise your hand. If you don't have the microphone, people can't hear you. So.
I'll give it to you in a minute, okay? Then we go here.
Okay, if you could just wait, please. And Bill will bring you the microphone in a second.
Okay, Marilyn Mamano from Harbordale. You mentioned a figure of, I think it was $2.5 million for sidewalks and roads. But that's a 5-year out number. That's a total number in the end at 5 years. There is no money in the 2024 budget for new sidewalks. There is money for repairing old sidewalks and streets, but not a penny for new sidewalks. And last year, we funded $200,000 to do a study of needs for sidewalk. That study is being done as we speak. And we will, by the end of this fiscal year, have a master plan for new sidewalks that are needed. And we won't have any money in the budget to start building those sidewalks for 5 years. I think that's a problem. I mean, a budget reflects your priorities. And if the budget doesn't, the budget says that we're not gonna start building these new sidewalks that we've just finished a master plan for, we're not even gonna start on them until 5 years down the road, I would tell you that that's the wrong priority. That's not a community-based priority. So if I had to go on the little budget thing, and I would say, all right, well, we'll take off 2 policemen. Ouch, 2 policemen. That would, give me maybe, what is it, about 197 each? That would give me about 3 in the first year, okay? And that would build a lot of sidewalks. I don't think we have to do that. I don't think you should ask us to do that. I really don't think you should. And I think that with the commission should find within $1 billion some money to build new sidewalks in the next fiscal year pursuant to our new plan. And I'm going to lobby very hard for it, and it's, you know, I'm not going to sit here and make that decision. I'm going to sit here and say.
Okay, so Marilyn,
we
you
need to
need
do
a
that.
question. We need a question.
The question is, find $500,000 in FY '24 to start building sidewalks.
Okay, thank you.
You know, thank you for your input. That's exactly what we're hoping for in the balancing act and the other areas for engagement.
Last question, Mary.
Okay.
Francesco Muti, Laudergate Isles. As I ride around the city on my bike, I see a lot of these little boxes, look like they have solar panel on top of them, and I've been told that they might be trash containers. Can you tell me what they are and if it's costing the city any money?
I don't know.
If so, how much?
So those are, I believe they're yellow. They have like advertisements around them maybe, and they have like some solar panels, right, like you mentioned. That's part of a program that Parks and Recreation is using so that we can offset the costs for pickup, and we do advertisements for those. And so we receive money for that, and that's why you see those around town. Does that answer your question?
So they're merely advertising placards?
They actually help with the advertising. They help offset the costs for pickup and also the operations.
They're recycling bins?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're trash bins. Yes.
Well, I've never seen anyone use one, and
I
I
have.
wonder, is
I
it
use them.
costing us any money? Or is it all free?
I don't have
your
all these
advertising
specifics, but I
revenue.
know that they do offset the costs. I want to say that it don't cost us money because of the advertisement, but I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Did they not replace the waste baskets that were already, or the garbage cans that were already out there? It seems like they did.
They did. Yeah,
Okay.
those were done as a pilot yet for that. Yes.
Madam President, if you just give me 1 minute to indulge. As a member of the city's Budget Advisory Board, I want to thank Laura, but most importantly, it's behind-the-scenes staff members that really roll up their sleeves and come, and they sharpen their pencils, and they're very transparent to the Budget Advisory Board. They're receptive to everything we ask for, and they send it to us in between meetings. And for that, I'd like to give you a round of applause and to your staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Bill's really integral to the whole process. The Budget Advisory Board, for anyone who hasn't served on it, they meet 14 times a year, plus 3 times with the commission, so it's a really big commitment. So
Yeah.
thank you for the work you do.
If you ever want to be on an advisory board that works a lot, that's the one to be on. So don't ever ask me to be on it. Okay, I think we're good.
All right.
All right?
Thank you so much for
So-
your time.
We appreciate you all. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. All right? I appreciate it. All right, thank you. Don't, be careful going that way. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right? All right. Okay. $1 billion, huh? When I was a child and I was here, commercial was a sandy boulevard and there was no bridge. I just thought I'd throw that in there. That's how times have changed. All right, our next presentation is on the Gateway intersection. Oh, Anthony, do you have a presentation? I'm sorry.
I don't really have a formal presentation.
Oh, wait, you know what? Let Anthony, I'm sorry, could you talk about I think people were interested in the noise, what was happening with the new noise abatement? Would that be the right word?
Noise Advisory Committee.
Or is that what it is? Noise Advisory Committee. I apologize. I was looking right at you.
No problem. Good evening. My name's Anthony Fajardo. I'm an assistant city manager with City of Fort Lauderdale. I work in Greg's office and I work with Laura, so I appreciate Bill saying that about Laura's team because they do work very, very hard. I was asked to come here tonight and talk about the Noise Advisory Committee. For those of you who may not be aware, the City Commission put together an advisory committee that's been looking at our noise ordinance with the help of a consultant. The consultant's named Sabine and Consultants. And basically right now what we have is an 85% draft. We don't really have anything, it's public record. I can make it available to you and we can distribute it through email, but there's really not a done complete document yet.
The consultant spent time in February and April putting noise meters all throughout the city based on recommendations from the advisory committee. We did walking tours. So some were placed for weekends, some were placed for a couple of weeks. And on those 2 rounds, they took a lot of data. They started compiling that data, putting it together to start making recommendations. The draft document, as I said, is at 85%, so it doesn't really have anything finalized. And what they've asked at the last meeting, which was last month, was that the advisory committee come back with comments that they can incorporate into that document after they had a discussion about some of the directions that they were recommending to go in. Some of them included changing our code to address noise in a different way, how we take the measurements, adding values for DBA and DVC that are requirements. Right now, they're or statements, so you can use either. And also looking at possible zoning regulations that would require new buildings to be constructed that are going to contain, so you have mixed-use buildings that will have like residential and commercial and retail and maybe entertainment venues, that they would be designed in such a way to kind of contain the sound. But those are preliminary recommendations right now. What's going to happen is at this next meeting, we should have a 100% document, and that will move forward to the board. They'll make a recommendation to the city commission, and at a point before the end of this calendar year, we'll bring it to the city commission for consideration and discussion. And then anything that would happen after that, regarding those recommendations, we'll have to do an ordinance amendment and take that through the process. So there'll be multiple times. If you're interested, you can definitely attend the noise committee meetings. They're public. And then when we get to the stage where we're going through the process to change and make any amendments, you'll be able to attend those as well. Yes. I don't know if Bill
Wait for
wants
the
to.
microphone, please. You have to get Bill's attention.
Ed Rebholz with Lauderdale Harbors. Your study, is it just downtown? Your study, is it just downtown Fort Lauderdale, or it gets in the suburbs? 'Cause in the burbs, we get noise from the guys blowing stuff around, mowing lawns, that type of stuff. And one might be out into they know the next one for the next house will be out. And sometimes you got a lot of noise out of that, as well as construction in our neighborhood.
Right, so what they've looked at in terms of areas is there are a couple of spots on the beach. One was by Bo's Beach House at that intersection. Another one was closer to the area where the W Hotel is, kind of over there by, what's that, Rock Bar back there? Or I guess that's a little further to the south, but they were in that general area. We used someone's balcony on one of the buildings. We were at Smitty's over here just down the street. We also did several locations downtown, some in Flagler Village, by the wharf, by the balcony. But the crux of the direction that we got wasn't about that discussion for like lawnmowers and leaf blowers. That was kind of separate, and the commission kind of addressed that and how they wanted to move forward with it, which not much changed after that discussion happened. The issues with the noise related to construction, that's not part of this either. We have a separate ordinance that deals with that. And so there's not a recommendation at this point to change that. However, that could come if somebody wanted to bring that up and the committee wanted to suggest that to the commission, we would take a look at it.
Hello, Ted and Sarah, River Oaks. Are you considering the amount of noise that 42 pickleball courts will make in a pristine natural park, and how the effects that'll have on the wildlife that's already existing in the park?
So it's hard to measure something that doesn't exist yet. So this is a study based on data that we're collecting in the field. What I would say to that is, if the noise ordinance is amended based on new evaluation criteria, right? So what intensity of the DBA, DBC are we picking, where we take the measurement from, it would apply to almost everything. There are only certain caveats, like I said, the lawnmower noise, that's a different thing, and then the construction noise is a different thing. But anything noise generated, that would still apply.
Hi, Sharon from Golden Heights. Off of 19th Street, is that part of the study? Were they placed in the study in District 3?
District 3, there was Smitty's was one, and I think there was one other location, and I'm doing it from memory. There's a map in the document What I can do is send it to you so you can see. I don't think that area was included though. And like I said, these were based on recommendations from the committee and members that showed up to the board meetings. So I don't think that area was included, but I'd have to check.
And also the high complaint areas. The
Yeah,
code,
that's really what generated it. Now, we did broaden it beyond that. So that's why we got some areas, over in, there was a couple areas in Flagler Village that when we walked around, we decided that those are areas we should check into also. But I'll send it to you if I can get your information and make sure you can have access to it.
Hi, Rick Buchanan, Coleridge Isles. Am I correct in assuming that you're not looking at noise related to Airbnbs and the issues that arise from the housing per se?
So no, it would include that. So if there is noise being generated from an Airbnb, and we actually have stricter noise requirements for Airbnbs than we do for other parts of the city. I think we use plainly audible in those situations. So when code goes out, if they can hear it, they can issue a violation and then take them through the process of, multiple violations will lead to the temporary suspension of your Airbnb permit, and you could have it permanently suspended. So yeah, what I'm trying to say is we do have different regulations that are typical for Airbnbs now, so we try to regulate those to a little bit of a higher standard. But these regulations would impact that as well, depending on what determinations made by the city commission.
Hi, I'm JJ Ryder from Rio Vista Civic Association. Was Las Olas also included in that? I mean, people drive down Las Olas on the weekend on their motorcycles or sports cars with the music blaring that you can hear 2 blocks away. I mean, have they done measurements on that area as well?
So they did do measurements on Las Olas. The one that I remember is Balcony. I think there was another one around that area. But specific to that topic of noise from vehicles, so as many of you might be aware, the state statute changed not that long ago. Police department has taken actions to try and address it directly. And the preliminary study found that is starting to work. And I think some of the members of the board have even said they've seen a reduction like on the beach. And we have one board member that lives in one of the high rises on the beach. So they do address it in there. How we change it and move forward, we'll have to, of course, comply with state statute, which is a little difficult to we can't really go outside those guidelines. But yeah, it does talk about that.
And Anthony, Las Olas was one of the walking studies that was done at different hours.
Yeah, the walking studies there was a walking study on the beach, Flagler Village, along Sistrunk, Las Olas, and then by the wharf. I think those are the 5 walking studies.
Okay.
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 All right.
Okay.
All right. All right. Thank you, Anthony. That wasn't hard, was it?
That bad?
You should come all the time. All right. Thank you. Okay. I didn't miss anybody else, right? I got everybody. Okay. So we're going to talk about the Gateway intersection. Everybody familiar with that? So I was just saying earlier, when I leave where I live and I head west on Sunrise Boulevard and I get that light right there at Gateway, I know it's 3 minutes. I'm going to be there for 3 minutes. So I do a lot on my phone then, and I always have something like I got to have something to do because, we can't waste any time. So this is like looking for an improvement of traffic flow, obviously, in that section. I know it kind of seems funny that we're talking about one intersection in the city, but it's a major, major intersection. And we all drive through there. I don't care who you are, you drive through there at least some point. So we're going to go right ahead. Are you going to go, if you would introduce yourselves
Yes. My name is
sure.
Chris McCurdy. I work for the Florida Department of Transportation District 4. You might have been familiar with Adam Naim. He's the former project manager, and I'm the new project manager. And I'm here today. I'm going to introduce the design consultant team. Carlos Sejas with Gannett Fleming is going to provide a presentation showing you the current status of our PD&E study at the Gateway intersection.
Hey, thank you. Well, have a seat if you want.
Good evening, everyone. Many of you may have already seen a version of this presentation. What we did is we had our workshops about a month or so ago. We took that presentation and we basically just pared it down a little bit to reduce it, and we're focusing on the alternatives. So if you have any other questions beyond this, hopefully this covers the material well enough, but we'd be available here to answer questions. So just so you know, we're gonna focus on the alternatives that we've evaluated and that we presented to the public. And as I present the alternatives, it is okay for you to stop. I'll try to pause on each one if you have any specific questions so that you understand them as we go through them, if that's okay. Better what it is. Not working? Is it down? It's not working. It's the arrow, right? Neither arrow seems to be working. All right, no. Next slide, can he move the slide? I'll just say next slide. All right, so this is the outline of the presentation. You already met the team members, the new project manager. I got other coworkers of mine that are here as well. We'll go over quickly our timeline for the project. It's a 2-year study. I'll get into that. I'll address what we call the purpose and need for the project, which is the basis of anytime we perform these types of studies. Most of the presentation is going to focus on the alternatives, like I said. We'll talk a little bit about public involvement. If you guys want to continue to be involved in the process, we welcome your input throughout.
There you go.
Nicholas, can you pull the mic closer to
Yeah.
you? Yeah, thank you, appreciate it, thank you.
It's not moving. I don't want to break this thing.
Would you rather just hold it?
Oh, I can do that.
Okay. Okay.
How's that? Better. Okay. And then we'll go to some questions and answers, and then we'll address where we're going to be going next. So next slide, please. Next slide. You met the team. Next slide. So DOT is doing this study in partnership with the MPO. You may have seen we had an MPO rep that showed up at our public workshop. We're also working closely with the city of Fort Lauderdale and Broward County in general. So they will be ongoing and working with us on this study as we move forward. Next slide. This is some standard language to say basically that FDOT now works directly with the central office rather than dealing with FHWA. In the past, DOT had to work directly with the feds, and now these studies are being handled directly with the state. They have the authority to conduct them, so this is standard language, just basically saying that. Next slide. One more. So the location, we are really focused on the intersection, but our study limits actually, you can see there, go a little bit beyond. We extend to the west to 15th. That's 15th on the west, 13th Street on the north, and we do go across the Middle River to Middle River Drive on the other side of the intersection. But again, you can see it's all centered around the intersection itself. Next slide. So that's our timeline. You can see there highlighted, it might be a little bit hard to see where we are. We just completed our first workshop. We're going to be having our next workshop end of October, probably likely early November. And you can see that it's about a 2-year study. Once the study is completed, it's in pink there. You can see there is right-of-way acquisition, and there's design, and then eventually there's construction. So we're quite a bit of ways from actually seeing any construction. We're still at the study phase. Next slide. Next slide. As I said, we have a specific purpose and need for the study. We really are focused on improving the operations of the intersection, but we're also looking at making other multimodal improvements to the intersection as well. Next slide. So these are the 6 basic needs for the study. This is the foundation of which we develop the alternatives. We try to specifically address these needs. As you all know, these are evacuation routes, so we have to address emergency evacuation and response. Modal interrelationships means we got to address all the modes, bike, ped, transit, freight, and so forth. We're not just focused on the automobile. Capacity is the big one when we talk about capacity. As we all know, it's the congestion at the intersection. It's trying to get more automobiles through the intersection, but at the same time being sensitive to pedestrians and cyclists. Demand just means that we have to address not only current demand, but future demand at this intersection, which is future, we know is going to be growing. There's going to be additional traffic, so we have to design to accommodate that future demand. Safety, this intersection has quite a few safety problems. If you attended our workshops, you saw some graphics that we had that actually showed this is what we term high crash intersection. There's some high crash spots and segments within the vicinity of the intersection. Next slide. So the alternatives. Next slide. Before I get into the alternatives, this graphic shows you the existing condition that's out there And we've highlighted the available public right-of-way. Those red lines show how much width we have in right-of-way, or how much space we have to work with, where we can do improvements without, if we go beyond those areas, we'd be impacting private property. So that would require acquisition of right-of-way by the department. So we try to stay as much as possible within the right-of-way. What you can see there is the most narrow right-of-way is actually right in the vicinity of the intersection. And so that is a little bit of a constraint we try to live with, and we try to not go beyond that because we tend to impact private property. But that's the basis of laying out the different configurations, is those are our physical constraints. Next slide. So here's a list of the alternatives. I'm not going to go into them in detail here because I'm going to go through each one, but there was 9 alternatives that we presented to the public. It includes those that we call at-grade alternatives, different versions of at-grade, different versions with having grade separation, and I'll get into those in more detail. And we included some that go over and some that potentially go under as underpasses. But without further ado, I'll get into them. Next slide. I forgot. There's also some evaluation criteria that we have to consider when we evaluate these different alternatives. And this lists some of those, and we solicited public feedback to make sure that we were, number one, find out which were most important to the public, and then make sure that when we compare the different alternatives that we take these into account. Next slide. So let's start with the alternatives. The first one is what we call the no project or do nothing. In every PD&E study, and this is what we're doing a PD&E study, the no build or do nothing is always on the table from beginning to end. So we could end this study and absolutely do nothing, and that's fine. That's part of the process. We also use this no build alternative as something to compare the alternatives to. So if you want to know how it compares to doing nothing, you get a way of being able to understand what that difference is or the delta. Yes, sir. You have a question?
Oh, sorry. Hang on. Can you wait until the end?
Let him get through all the alternatives and then.
Okay, that's fine. Just maybe write it down. It has to do with this one. I'm okay answering questions.
Okay,
specifically.
he said, go ahead, Bill.
You can go ahead.
Wait for the microphone. Here he comes.
Where are the other stoplights? There's one at 20th, there's one, why aren't they shown?
We didn't show it just to simplify the graphic, but there are additional stoplights out there. This was just to show you the existing. What happens is when we plop them on there, it occupies a lot of space and you kind of can't see what's down below, but there are.
But the lights add to the problems.
Oh, no, agreed. This was a graphical thing, not that we don't acknowledge that. That is a great comment, but yes, that was not the intent. Sorry about that. Anything else on the existing? Okay, next slide. So this is what we call our alternative 2. As you can see there, there's a couple different colors of gray. Those mean something. Also up on the top left, we have some basic statistics, and we'll carry those through for each of the alternatives. It'll let you compare some of the major variables so that you'll see they're related to traffic and different other factors. But the main thing to understand about this alternative, this is what we call the alternative that does the least harm, that tries to address all the needs of the intersection without having significant impacts to the area. So this alternative actually would work with what's out there and seek to widen the roadway primarily. We use the term widening, which means just make it a little bit wider, versus in engineering terms, we'll use reconstruction, where we entirely just pretend that it's not there and just reconstruct the intersection. The other alternatives that you'll see reconstruct the intersection. They basically say, assume there's nothing there, we're going to reconstruct it in its entirety. This concept says, no, let's try to keep as much as what's there, and let's see what we could add or widen to the intersection, and what can we gain. So we use this term, transportation systems management, to refer to that alternative. And so the light and dark gray refers to the areas that will widen, which is the darker gray, and then the other areas are basically just resurfacing the existing asphalt. And so you can see quite a bit of the intersection involves resurfacing, but there are some areas that we would actually widen the intersection to add additional pavement out there. And those would be going into the existing green areas that exist out there. In terms of right-of-way acquisition, it would all be to the east. We show those 2 little rectangles there to show it's relatively small areas in the area of the bank, and it's a narrow slither there next to the condominium that's there. It's not a significant amount of right-of-way. It's only a few feet of additional right-of-way that would be required. And those additional feet would, as you can see, are focused on the area just at the intersection. Once you get north of the intersection, we don't need that additional right-of-way. And if you recall that graphic that I showed you about the right-of-way, that's because the right-of-way was narrowest. It's only 100 feet right by the intersection. But when you get north of the intersection, it widens out and you have more than 100 feet. So we don't need the acquisition of right-of-way. So this, in essence, kind of evens out the right-of-way that's out there. The blue is what we call a shared use path. Basically, it's for bicyclists and for pedestrians to use. It's 10 to 12 feet wide and much wider than what's out there. If you've been out to the intersection, the sidewalk out there is as narrow as 5 feet. And in many cases, you have the buildings right behind the sidewalk. And what we've done with this alternative is we've tried to create, in addition to the shared use path, some additional green space behind the shared use path and create a buffer between the path and the buildings that are out there. Any questions on the TSM&O?
Yes, quick question over here.
Yes.
By widening, you mean adding an additional lane of traffic?
In some cases, it's lane, most cases it's a lane, but sometimes it's widening additional asphalt, but in most cases it's additional lanes, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Am I being very naive to think that you don't need to rebuild the roads, you need to change the lighting, the light structure, where they're, for how long they're on and off? I mean, the roadways seem fine. It's just the lights are terrible.
Yeah, we look at the signalization. One of the things that we do is we actually have a program that we can simulate this intersection, the signals at the intersection. But we not only simulate this intersection, you have to look at the up and downstream intersections, as we all know, right? Because you have to have continuous flow. So they all work together. We're able to simulate that. And it shows ultimately that this intersection is constrained. And part of it is physical constraints. It's not just the light. We're able to play around with that program and optimize it. And we've done that. We've optimized it. And we can get a little bit more throughput on this intersection in theory, but not a whole lot just by playing with the signals. Basically, with the future demand, you're going to need additional space for cars or vehicles at some point in time. Yes?
Does this one take away the pedestrian safety landing areas? You have to cross the whole street?
No, we still do. We've narrowed the medians to some extent, but we have, I think, a minimum of 8 feet. We're trying to keep a minimum to have that physical storage for the pedestrians, but it is narrower than it is today. The advantage is that we've reduced the crossing distances. We've made them straighter. If you call the existing ones kind of zigzag around, these are definitely much shorter and much straighter, and will reduce your crossing time to get to the intersection. It's actually going to be safer. You don't have to spend all that time in the islands crisscrossing. So, any other questions? And by the way, many of these features that I just described, we applied them to all the alternatives. In other words, the TSO was kind of like the base if we widen it. And then when we get to the other build alternatives, we try to keep some of those same features to be fair, whatever we could get into each of the alternatives. And you'll see that now. Next slide. So configuration-wise, this intersection is similar to the TSM&O, but this one, like I said, we're going to reconstruct. Rather than just add to the existing, we're going to say, in an ideal world, if we had to relay out, reconfigure the intersection as engineers, how would that look? And so it's slightly different footprint than the TSM&O because we weren't fixed with holding it the existing. We realigned it and made it a little bit better, the alignment. And you can see that the right-of-way slightly increases in the area of the bank and the condo, but not a lot. You see the square footage there, but by, in terms of width, it's just a couple feet more of additional width that you would need. With the bank, it's all green area. It's not like we're impacting any building. And same thing when you get to the condominium property, you're just impacting area that's today is just green area there in front of their property. We're not hitting any walls, any buildings, anything like that. So it's just basically making it a continuous shared use path through the intersection and reconfiguring the intersection to reconstruct it as what we call an at-grade T. The major improvements that we're doing for the at-grade T, similar to TSM&O, is we're providing the triple lefts, as you can see there. So even though today there are triple lefts going to the north, the left turns are kind of short. This makes them all uniformly long or longer. And so that's the capacity that we added. So we have additional more storage space for vehicles to store there during each green phase. So we do gain some capacity to flush through the intersection. The other thing that we're doing is providing a triple left going southbound to go to the beach as well to the east. The other additional capacity improvement is the westbound to northbound. Today it's a single right, that would be a dual right. Again, in terms of the right-of-way, it's similar to the prior alternative, again, just impacting the bank property. This alternative compared to the TSM&O, because we had the space, we provide a little bit larger green areas, because we weren't widening, we weren't constrained by the widening, so we did provide additional green space in the intersection. But it is very similar to the configuration that's out there today. It is reconstructed and adds the additional capacity, as I mentioned. So it's still operating as a T intersection. The other thing that we did is we tightened the intersection. By tightened, I mean we reduced those larger radiuses. If you recall, the existing intersection has very large radius turn, particularly the eastbound to northbound movement and vice versa. And what we've done is we've made them more traditional right turns so that the intersection could operate a little bit safer for pedestrians and cyclists. It also makes it a little bit more compact and makes it easier for pedestrians to cross the street. Any questions on this alternative? Okay, next alternative. Okay, this one we called the downstream, and basically what we've done is the biggest change here is the left turn, the one that's for the northbound, the eastbound to northbound left turn, I'm sorry. We've increased the storage for that turn, and what we've done is we've shifted it over to the east. And so this alternative actually has greater impacts to the bank property. And basically from an operational side, what it does is it lets us, again, store more vehicles along Sunrise to, in theory, make the intersection operate better. And again, you see the stats there with this intersection. In terms of number of lanes, shared use path, it's very similar to the prior two alternatives. The difference is how we treated the left turn lane. We just increased the storage to get additional capacity, vehicle capacity through the intersection. Any questions on this alternative? Okay, next slide. Okay, this alternative does the inverse of the last alternative. What it does is it moves the left turn, the eastbound to northbound left turn to the west. And even though it shortens the storage a little bit for that left turn, what it does is it reduces the conflict point between that left turn and the southbound left turn. And what it does is it creates a different point of crossing for those movements. It literally moves that point of crossing north. This operationally can have some advantages if you did have enough space because of the way the intersections, the signalized intersections work. In this case, for this intersection, due to limited space, it didn't have as many operational benefits as we thought, but it was something that we thought was worth studying, so we looked at this alternative as well. One of the things it does do, which is not a good thing, is it impacts the access there for the PNC Bank. The point of crossing is where the driveway is today, so that's not a good location to have, that crossing location. So it really doesn't work necessarily well for this location, but we looked at it anyway to make sure that this wasn't a viable alternative. This crossover, in many cases, you may have heard the term displaced left turn. They've looked at it in other locations, and in some cases it can be beneficial. In this case, it did not pan out as well as we thought. Next slide. Now we get to the roundabout alternatives. This, as many of you know, has a long history. The DOT and I think the city in the past looked at a roundabout. This is very similar to the roundabout that was looked at prior. What we did is we tried to optimize it and make it as good as it could be. And what we literally did is we moved the circle a little bit over to the west to reduce the impacts to the bank. I don't know if you guys recall, the planning study had larger impacts to the bank. And we also tried to reduce the length of that flyover bridge. This does, in addition to having the roundabout down below, does have a flyover that goes up and over for the eastbound to northbound movement. Now, operationally, as we all know, roundabouts have challenges. This is what we call a multi-lane roundabout. And we show there that the roundabout typically is yield control for those movements that go into the circle. But this roundabout actually has 3 movements that are free flow, which is good for cars, but not necessarily for bikes and peds. And it's yield control, so there is no signal control per se. Now, we show there on the approach legs some traffic control devices, which are going to be necessary, some type of traffic control to allow pedestrians to cross the intersection. So in order to provide these types of pedestrian treatments at basically the in points and outbound points of the roundabout, once you have any substantial amount of pedestrian traffic, the roundabout would cease to function as a roundabout, because roundabouts work free flow pretty much under a yield condition. So for this location, the roundabout did not perform as well as we thought. In terms of the impacts you could see to the bank, similar, maybe a little bit more than the other alternatives. The flyover has some challenges, as we all know. There's challenges with vehicles getting into the flyover ramp. It's a single lane flyover. And there'll be some issues on the flyover where it touches down. That area on the north end becomes what we call a weave area. In other words, vehicles in the flyover are going to be trying to get over to the right, and vehicles on the right are going to be coming over to the left. And that can create some challenges there, which is probably why you don't see too many flyovers in arterials, because you have people trying to make movements at the nearby intersections. So that's the roundabout with the flyover. Any questions? Okay, next slide, please. This alternative is essentially the same as the last alternative I just described. The difference being is rather than going up and over, we would go under. So that same movement, the eastbound to northbound, rather than being a flyover, it'd be what we call an underpass. You can see there the big issue with the underpass, one significant one, is the cost, way more costly. It has the same issues as the above grade flyover in terms of the access and the weave. The advantage of the underpass is you don't see it like you see the flyover. In other words, it would be underground. But of course, being underground has its own challenges. Utility impacts, flood, potential for flooding, all those other things we'd have to deal with. So, compared to the prior alternative, operationally it's essentially the same, but obviously it's much more costly and has several different types of impacts. In terms of the right-of-way impacts, again, it'd be similar to the prior alternative. Yes, sir.
When I look at these pedestrian signals, did you consider the possibility of raising the pedestrian crosswalk so that it would go over the traffic or under the traffic instead of, because if, like the one there on the left, my left, when that one's working, everyone in the roundabout is going to just keep going around because they're not going to be able to go through.
Correct.
So that's why I was wondering if that was considered as an alternative.
One of the issues with or challenges with a multi-lane roundabout is that, and the latest guidance says that. That's why you don't see that many multi-lane roundabouts, because how do you deal with the bikes and peds? And then once you do have some type of signal control, that defeats the purpose of a roundabout, which is a yield and a free flow movement. So we show it there conceptually where it would work. This likely would not work as we've drawn it. It would be very challenging because once you have some type of signal control, the roundabout with the volumes that we have there could potentially lock up. So providing an overpass is a possibility, very expensive. And people don't like using them if they don't have to, because it's a headache to go up and then back down, and people will tend to just jaywalk. And we did, just so you know, and you probably know this, the existing intersection has quite a bit of jaywalking just because it's difficult to get across. And we've measured that. So we would try to, the ideal is an at-grade intersection with, like a typical intersection with minimal distances to cross the intersection. Any other questions? Okay, next alternative. Now, this alternative is similar to the alternative 3, which was the at-grade T, but we've added the flyover to this alternative, similar to the roundabout. So in other words, what happens is we grade separated that movement, the largest movement, and we had a T that we reconstructed. The impacts are slightly, and the footprint is slightly more than the alternative 3, because we have to fit that flyover in the middle there. So it widens things out a little bit. So you can see if you were to look at the square footage, it's a little bit more, the impact. It's not substantially more, but it is more. It does have the benefits of the T with the flyover as well. So operationally, this gets us, the benefits of the T that you saw before for the alternatives 2 and 3, plus the addition of the flyover. Now, it does bring the problems of the flyover that I mentioned before, issues getting into the flyover, potentially issues getting in and out of the flyover. They would have to be dealt with over time. But from an operational perspective, this does increase the throughput significantly and is safer for pedestrians and cyclists to cross the street compared to the roundabout.
I have a question.
Sure.
with the flyover, one of the considerations and concerns were from the people at East Point Towers.
Correct.
Access to that, if they're headed southbound
Correct.
on Federal, how do they get in?
Correct.
They essentially would have to go down towards the Galleria or to 15th Avenue to turn around and come back.
Correct, great comment, I missed that. There's a median opening there that the folks from the condominium that he mentioned use to turn around and get in there. The flyover, since it's in the median, would make us have to remove that median opening that exists there. So somebody else, anybody who would be going there now would have to do a roundabout path or come a different way to be able to get there. So that existing median opening would be impacted with the flyover. On any of these, that would apply to the roundabout or anything, anytime we have a flyover, or any of the underpass options as well.
Could you extend the height of the flyover so there'd be that median cut through, they'd go under it?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, we could keep that bridge going as long as we want it now.
Sure.
What happens is now we start impacting the next set of median openings. If you keep going down, there's, I think, two or three more before you get to the main intersection.
There are.
You would impact
somebody.
Right. And then the closer you get to 13th, the more difficult it becomes that weave area I described, because you're getting near the intersection. Operationally, you have a lot of issues, so.
And then
yes.
you also have the issue of the cost, because this is one of the
Yes.
more expensive choices
Yes.
between that and the tunnel. I don't know if you even threw
Correct.
that out yet.
Nothing's been thrown out yet, but these are kind of the pros and cons that we're just.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments, questions? Okay. And then I think we can go to the next one. So this is the same as the prior. It's a variation. Rather than going over, now we're going under. So it's an at-grade T with the underpass. Again, it has the advantages of the underpass and the disadvantage of the underpass. Big disadvantages is the cost, as you can see there. Any questions on the last one?
I have a question.
Sure.
For all 9.
Yes.
Looking back, let's just take the last 25 years. And we've known there's not been a lot of improvement in the last 25 years of the way it currently is today. But yet we've seen in the past 25 years a dramatic increase of vehicular traffic. What is the percentage of all these alternatives looking out 25 years from now? What is the percentage of vehicles today that all these alternatives will be able to accomplish the additional traffic 25 years from now?
Every one of these, I don't know the exact number, I don't have it memorized, but every one of these alternatives, those statistics are for the traffic 25 years from now. When we do the evaluation, that's what we analyze and we model. The model that I mentioned, we always look at existing traffic and then we forecast it out 25 years. What percent it is, I think the growth was 1% per year. You do the math, it's compounded exponentially, so it's not 20%, it's higher probably. But it's 1% per year, if I recall, the growth rate that was assumed in the models.
And is that a safe percentage increase as a national model?
Yeah, that's common, especially in an urbanized area built out. I know we're getting more dense, but we're also getting more multimodal. That's a very common nowadays percentage for growth, annual percentage for growth. That's pretty common. Back in the day, when Broward was booming, it'd be 3, 4, or 5%, but these areas now, usually you're in the 1, maximum 2%.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Was there anything that looked at more acquisition of private land, i.e. buying the bank, buying those parking lots on the north side where I think there's the school has dormitories and stuff like that, buying more of that land to create something out of this foundation?
Generally, we try to minimize impacts, and we have to. The process, we are regulated under NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. We have to attempt to minimize adverse impacts. Also, every acquisition that the state does has to be justified, and there has to be a good, strong technical justification. So ultimately, in many cases, you end up in court, and the engineer has to go there and testify it's justified. So you have to put everything to that level or standard. It's a high standard to acquire right away. So the state does not just go out and acquire right away. It's a big burden to acquire right away. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. This may not apply to this, but what about the smart signaling? Is there anything being done with that in this area?
Yes, I mean, my understanding is Broward County and everybody eventually go into smart signaling. There we go, go into smart signaling. We have not modeled it with smart signaling per se. That would be some type of an adjustment we could do. We assume that's going to happen naturally. But our design is designed with what is the state of the art now, which is we don't know necessarily the benefits of that smart signaling, so we model it with whatever are the current standards and procedures of today. But you could assume that with technology, there will be efficiencies. For example, we're designing this for a 20, 25-year design life. With technology, you could probably stretch it out to 30 or 35, would be my guess, at a minimum. So. Yes, sir.
So these alternatives show a underpass or overpass for traffic moving east and then going north, correct?
Correct.
Did you look at, or is there value in looking at an underpass or overpass coming south, going east?
We don't have it here shown, but we looked at that ourselves. We looked at a couple other options of maybe even grace separating the through movement as well, but the geometry just doesn't work. The impacts were huge. If you think there would be substantial with, the biggest issue isn't just the impact, but what would be the benefit? And these had much bigger benefit with smaller impacts, so it'd be very hard to justify those. And you'd impact all those businesses along the edge as well.
Given these 9 alternatives, since this is very hard to read at this scale, which of the 9 get you the most bang for the bucks in terms of throughput, okay? Gets the most cars through in terms of throughput? And is that the primary driver, or are there?
No, that's one, because we have to take into account, the bikes and the peds as well, but, DOT's in the transportation business, so that's an important one. I would say 2 and 3 do very well. I would say maybe 4 decently, and the roundabouts operationally look well, but once you put those signals in, they don't. So then I would say 8 probably would be the other one that would do well, which is the T with some type of flyover does well, at the expense of the access that he mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the sacrifice. But in terms of throughput, 8 would probably be the highest in terms of throughput, because we get the benefits of the at-grade T plus the flyover.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, well.
We're good?
Whew, everybody got that
Thank
down
you.
pat? Okay, got all that? So, listen, thank you very much. Really appreciate you guys coming. Thank you so much. Thank you to you guys too, all right? Thanks. Okay. Where'd this come from? All right, so that's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot. I'll put this right here right now. All right, so that concludes the, what, did somebody say something? Okay, no. That concludes the, our speakers and guests, so we have some council business. We can go through real quick. Before I forget, we do have 2 more socials this year. I'm going a little bit out of order here, so forgive me. Thank you again. I have a date. Hey, Michael, we have the date for the social that's going to be in District 4, and the date's October 30th. So keep that in mind. It's not Halloween. It's the day before Halloween. We don't quite have a venue yet, but we have a couple that are, I just don't want to say it because then that won't work. I'll put the kibosh on it. So, and then December, do we have a date? I didn't write it down.
Yeah, it's going to be, it will be the holiday soiree party, combination of everything else.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll let you know the date. I didn't write it down. I'm not sure we really.
You're going to make it the regular business. It'll be on the business night of the second Tuesday, which is the council meeting.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Okay. All right.
Right.
So just
It'll be the 12th, December the 12th.
there you go. Thank you. I don't know why I didn't know that. Okay. All right. And Marilyn, did you want to talk about the P3 committee, or did you want to wait till you meet with? You didn't meet with your committee, did you?
August, I couldn't get everybody.
Okay. So we're gonna.
September.
Okay. So we're gonna wait till the next meeting. And the treasurers, I don't have a treasurer's report. Melinda had to leave town suddenly. Her mother had an accident. She lives out of town, and so she's, had to go take care of her mom. So I don't have the treasurer's report. I wouldn't think that too much had changed. So if somebody really wants to know what we have, I can read you the one from the last time. And Jim, do you have anything from the Charter Revision Board? Not really?
I do, but it's lengthy. I mean,
Can we get you to post it on the website?
I can do that. I can do
Okay.
that.
Is that okay with everybody?
I give you a brief overview so that you can get out of here.
Okay, okay.
So the Charter Revision Committee has their monthly meeting, and at the last one, it was probably 3 hours long.
We sat there the
So
whole time.
That 3 hours, a lot of things were discussed. I think there's probably 3 key takeaways. But most importantly, a lot was not decided, and I think that's a very important takeaway, waiting for the city attorney to opine on a number of the topics that they talked about. And the key topics that were discussed that evening were lobbyists on advisory boards or any other boards with the city, elections, how elections are run, primaries, whether primaries are permitted, they're not by state law now. How redistricting occurred. That was a very lengthy discussion. There was a lot of good points brought up. But throughout the meeting, when a topic comes up, there's a lot of back and forth because most of the members of the board are attorneys or in practice with government on a local or a county level. So there was a guest speaker. The guest speaker was the Senior Assistant County Attorney for Broward, Nathaniel Klitzberg. His role is really important because he was trying to clarify on a higher level what takes place in formulating an election process as well as the redistricting process and how things can get muddled up when you have a delay in an election. So there's a lot of detail in there. And again, I could probably summarize this and post it on the website. After the election discussion, which again went on and on and on, the last item was leasing, sale, or licensing of city property. And that's a really big issue. And it's really important for all of you to understand that at the charter revision meetings, no decisions are made. They're just, ultimately, there will be recommendations. And that committee will come to the council and to individual neighborhoods and present their recommendations, which then go to the city commission for a tentative approval, but nothing is ever changed in the charter until a public election occurs. So it's a long, involved process. So there's these lengthy meetings, there's a lot of legal language that has to be discussed and reviewed and redrafted. From there, the findings of the board go to the city commission, they talk about it. There's public input all along the way, and then after that process, it goes to the city, it goes to the public for a vote. So that could occur in 2024, but there's a lot of steps. So on the leasing agreements, there was a lot of back and forth on the definition of licensing and leasing, short-term versus long-term, the categorization of different size and types of properties. For example, a Lockhart Stadium or a park versus Executive Airport, where a leasing agreement with private entity is encouraged because they're serving to some degree in the public interest. But the definition of public interest was a common thread in all of these discussions about both sale, lease, or license of a city property. And one of the concerns about licensing is it's a way to get around any type of hard agreement. So 50-year licenses and agreements came under pretty heavy scrutiny. And by the way, I would recommend if anybody really wants to get into the details like we did, that you go on the YouTube channel and just type in Fort Lauderdale Charter Review or Charter Revision Board. And they're all right there. So you can listen to it if you want to sit there for 3 hours and case of this last one, but some of them are a little shorter, maybe 2 hours. But they are lengthy meetings. And also on the city's website, there's an agenda and there are minutes that will be posted. The minutes for this last meeting have not been posted yet because they're simply draft minutes. So all of those things are available to the public to review now. So you can see the sequence from the very beginning of the board when the city manager, the city attorney, Dwayne Spence, put together a list of things that the board was tasked with addressing. Since then, there's been a lot of other things that have come up when looking at the actual charter to see what needs to be changed and what might be a gray area or perhaps an outdated, an outmoded line item. So those are really the real down and dirty quick takeaways. Nothing was decided. Well, there was a couple things. Actually, the question of lobbyists on an advisory board was addressed by the assistant city attorney, and Paul talked about that, and he said he opined, he felt that there was no conflict at this time. There were a couple people that took issue with that and wanted to discuss it. That will be brought forward in another meeting, and I think that's kind of the theme of a lot of these. There's a lot of things that are brought up, and you can't make a decision even in 3 hours because there's so much material there. So the next it carries over to the next meeting, and a lot of this will be available for public discourse when the time comes.
Okay, thank you, Jim. And if you really want to look at it, I'd say watch the last half hour. Don't say I said that.
Whatever.
Madam President, would it be advisable for the Council of Civic Associations to go ahead and send a letter to the Charter Review Board asking to co-host a public participation meeting concurrent with a Council of Civic Association meeting and dedicate that meeting just to the Charter Review recommendations or proposals and go ahead and get on record as...
I think I can see where in the future that is probably a good idea. They're in such a preliminary stage in my mind.
And I understand that. I think looking long-term, if we get our name thrown out there in the hat, that when they're ready to make those public participation meetings, we're first in line.
I think that's a great idea. And they did ask specifically for us to have a liaison to them. So I'm sure that they would be, I'm sure that they would want to do that. So when they do have recommendations, that's a good idea. So we'll bring that up at the next meeting if we feel brave enough to talk. How's that? Okay. Any thoughts or other questions for Jim? Wait 1 second. Here you go.
I have a question that's not related to, I'm sorry. It's an FDOT question, but it wasn't related to what they were doing. I don't know if anyone has noticed how dirty I-95 has become with all the trash. We have a liaison in the city, what I understand, with FDOT. Who is that liaison? Do you know? Because we need to make a complaint.
Go ahead, Bill. I believe it's Karen Warfel would be because she's the manager of transportation management with the city. So she would be able to get your complaint, your concern to the right people at FDOT. FDOT is a big animal. And, there's a lot of different people with different purposes. So I would address it to Karen Warfel and let her take it from there.
Is it Warfel or Warford? Is it Warford or what?
Warfel. W-A-R-F-E-L.
F-E-L, okay.
I'm sorry.
I'm a Hoosier, I can't pronounce it.
warfel@fortlauderdale.gov. Thank you.
He doesn't really need a microphone, I guess.
She gets it done.
All right.
She gets it done, that's right.
Did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes? Any corrections or additions or any changes? Nope. All in favor of the minutes as they are? Say aye. Any opposed? Okay. Minutes passed. All right. That concludes our meeting unless there's any old business that somebody wants to bring up, which there isn't. So, all right. Thank you all for coming out in the heat. I really appreciate it. It's great to see everybody. Stay cool. All right. Thank you.